Hi, welcome back to Write On. I'm your podcast host, John Abrahamson. This is episode 5, and today we're going to talk about outlines. So, the challenge with this one is that anyone who is listening to the podcast and not watching the YouTube channel will have a hard time following along because I'm going to do some screen shares here. So, I'll do my best to talk visually. So, if you're just listening to the podcast, you can try to follow along with what I'm talking about for outlines. But if you're on the YouTube channel, you'll be able to see the follow along as I go through some of the templates that I use. That being said, I'm going to share the template that I'm using, on my author website. So if you are on this podcast, you should see a link in the description to download the template that I'm about to use. So if you're on your phone and listening to a podcast, you can actually download the Excel template right now and follow along as I talk through this, or you can just refer to it later if it's something that you sound interested in. So let's start with the template right now. Okay, so what I have on the screen right now is an Excel workbook. It has 4 tabs. And the way this workbook works is going from left to right, starting at the very highest level you can think of for coming up with an idea for a book. And then every single tab in the workbook, every single sheet, drills down one extra layer. So the first tab, it's called Overview. The way I created it, it's just a one-sentence idea of the story. Start as high as you can go to your elevator, not even an elevator pitch, just the most simplistic form of the idea. So in this case, I'm using Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark just to paint the picture, because most people have seen that movie or know about it. And for me, I'm one of those authors that absolutely needs an outline. I need to know where the story is going, everything in between. You're not going to be able to predict every single detail, and we'll talk about that actually in the next blog episode, in the next podcast, but I absolutely need an outline. Some people can just sit down and just start typing and just bang away at the keyboard, and that's fantastic, but for me, I absolutely need to have some kind of roadmap, some kind of guideline for me. So in this example, the first sheet overview, it says plot, and I just came up with a quick one sentence that says, college professor and part-time archaeologist Indiana Jones travels the world to find the Ark of the Covenant before it gets into the wrong hands. That's it. Very simple. Just this is what happens. Here's the character, and this is the overarching story. The second tab breaks the story down into 3 different acts or parts. Part 1, 2, and 3, or Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. And it's one level deeper. So it breaks the book up into thirds. It breaks the story up into thirds. So Act 1 says Indiana Jones, you just establish the character, and he gets ready to trek the globe. Act 2 is the entire middle where he follows the clues. He goes to Nepal, he sees Marion, he goes to Cairo, meets his friend Saul, and then they pinpoint the location for the Ark of the Covenant, and then he gets trapped with Marion inside of the Well of Souls. Act 3 is where everything comes to a head and gets wrapped up. So Indy and Marion escape the cave, they get the Ark back from the Nazis, they get captured again, and then they get the Ark back again. So again, very high level, but if you were writing this as a book, you would know roughly where in the story things happen. The third workbook, or the third spreadsheet rather in the workbook, breaks it up into what I call a 9-box. So column A has act or part 1, 2, and 3. Row 1 has 3 different columns. It says protagonist, antagonist, and subplots. And what that does, again, it breaks it up into thirds. So there's 3 different work streams, if you will, or silos going on. So there's the storyline of the protagonist. Then the next column is the plot of the antagonist. And then the third column is all the subplots. So that can be flashbacks and can be supporting characters. It could be whatever you want. But the point is, it takes it to another level. It peels back another layer of the onion where you can break the story up into thirds again, but get a little bit more detail. So I'm not going to read this verbatim. It's just a visual of how each layer you keep building the story a little bit more at a time. So that way when you sit down and actually write the story, you have a roadmap again, and you're not starting from scratch. And then the last tab is literally chapter by chapter. So you may know off the top of your head that you want 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 chapters. You might know that it's going to be a massive story or an epic story or short story. So if you know that, you can just list this out. The example I have on the page is 3 columns. Column 1 is the chapter number. The second column is the place of where that happens. And the third column is a 1-sentence action of what happens. So in the scenario on the screen, chapter 1, for example, it'll say the university. Indy teaches his archaeology class. Marcus comes in and says they have guests from the government and explains, that they're looking for the lost ark. So 1 sentence, that's it. It just, again, plans the flow, plans how many roughly chapters, where the key turning points happen, where the climax happens, all of that stuff. Now, you can look in the description of this podcast. You can also look, if you're on the YouTube channel, there's a link for where you can download it. It's on johnabrahamson.com/projects. Scroll to the bottom of the page and you'll see a download button. Feel free to use this template. Insert, add, delete, do whatever you need to it to make it your own. Hopefully it helps you. And there is one last step that I want to show. So in Microsoft Word, where I usually type my stories, I know there's all different applications out there that many people use, whether if you're on a Mac or a PC, whatever it is that you want to type on. The example that I'm using right now is Word, and what I'm showing on the screen is after you have your outline, right? After you have your chapters mapped out, your 9-box, whatever it is you want to do and how you want to plan your story, I actually put all the chapter headers in a Word document, and then I write a paragraph. So that way, again, I'm taking it to the next level. I'm taking that 1 sentence by chapter, and I'm taking it to a paragraph. That way I have a summary of everything that happens in every chapter. And then the next step is really getting in there and starting to write your first draft itself. But this will really help you stay focused. It'll help you stay on task. Again, first draft, just knock it out, so you don't have to worry about grammar and word count and any of that. Just get all the raw thoughts out there. Just get it on paper, because you're going to have to go back several times and edit it later. So again, John Abrahamson, episode 5 of Write On.